Hello, for this video we're going to show you how to use Background Designer to design your own tileable backdrop. Now when you open up this software you'll see that you already have a brush attached to your cursor because you start with brush mode and you basically have to pick your brush here on the right, what you want to draw with, and there's mountains, some land, some shapes, some grass, foliage, leaves, branches, some trees, some rocks, some fog, some weather like rain and snow, and some little pathways, a couple of props and buildings. There's yet to be animals added, and there is some kind of figures that you might want to put around if you want to show the scale of something. So first off, you start on layer 10 just in case that you start drawing and you want to draw underneath. Then you can just go a layer below, or you want to draw in front, you can do that there. So pressing backspace clears everything and we can get started. So let's start with customizing the color of the sky. So we've got the sky top, which is basically this color up here, and I can change that to a nice sky blue. And we've got the bottom of the sky, I'm going to make this much kind of brighter blue like that. So that's our base for the sky, and we want to go down to round about layer 1. We'll leave layer 0 just blank in case we want to put anything else behind, like the sun or the moon or something behind some clouds. So I'm going to click on the clouds and I have to press B to activate the brush, and you can see it's got a few different colours in the cloud, and you can actually customize these colours here. So as you come over here to customize these, you just click on whatever color that you want to change and just start making some changes. You'll see the cloud actually change in color in certain areas. And you can get the color that you want. I want a kind of orange base to this. And if I don't want any of these colors to show, I can just take away the color completely by fading it out. And we're basically left with this blue tone here, so I can actually change this into transparent mode and take away the blue tone as well, and I'm basically just left with the orange part. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter so that it doesn't show up so dark, because those colours tend to mix with the base colour. Okay, so I've got a kind of sky orange here, and I'm just going to click in a few places, but I'm using the mouse wheel to change the size of the brush, and E and R to rotate, and I just want to vary this up a little bit and layer up. I'm going to press X to flip it horizontally and scale it, because I want to get a nice mix here that makes this cloud look unique. And now I'm going to change this to a slightly more yellow tone, make it a bit smaller, and I can actually change the opacity here around about 50% and just bring a little bit of that in. Okay, so I've got a kind of artistic looking cloud here. I want to layer up with a few more, so I'm going to go to cloud 2 and just put a little dash in there. Press X to flip it horizontally. I'm going to scale it down a bit, maybe a little dash here and there as well. Cloud 3, I'll just add a little bit more variation. Cloud 4, you can't see very much of that because the transparency is so low and it's not mixing with any colours so well, but you can see as I bring in some base tone I can have that show up a bit better. Now if I click on this colour and alt click this higher colour here, basically just picking any colour actually, and then I control click it, it's going to transfer this colour to each other one, so all of these tones are basically the same now. And I'm just going to bring those in by using the slider, and I can actually make the little tonal adjustments I want to that actual brush. I think maybe a bit more yellow with that one. Yeah, and then I'm going to press 3 to bring the opacity right down. In fact, let's do 6, and I'm going to put that there. Now you'll notice that there's just a single thumbnail down here of this image, and that basically means that what you see is what you're going to get, and it's not going to be tileable. It's not going to wrap round itself like a panoramic tileable sky. Now to do that, all you have to do is press W. That turns it into wrap mode. So anything that you click here on this side is basically going to take the other half of it and put it on the right. And that way you get this tileable background that you can use for a whole kind of panoramic view. And that's what we want to do here. So I'm just going to work on the sky a little bit more. And I think I'll put in some mountains. So I'm going to go to this mountain, and you can see it doesn't fit in too well. It's quite ghostly looking, and for one reason is the opacity is too low. So I'm going to put that back up, and I don't want any of this fading out, so I'll just bring these tones all the way up, and I'll put this to solid mode. So this is transparent when this is low, and when you move it to the right it becomes solid. So it makes sure that you get the base tone in there. Now the colours aren't great, but if you press tab, what happens is it will try and make new colours for you that match the scene, and it will also randomise some colours. So I'm just going to go through until I find something that works. I want it to be fairly bluish. Now if you hover over some pixels, it will also try and pick some colours nearby. I quite like this. So now that's done, I'm just going to place that there and maybe get one more mountain and flip it horizontally and place that there. So that is now going to be our sky, and we can wrap that round like a cylinder and make it rotate round the camera, and it would forever repeat itself. So I can save that out. So I'm just going to save that with Control S, and let's call this our blue sky. Alright, cool. So now I'm going to move to a layer more in the foreground, somewhere up here, and I'm going to think about some of the objects I want to pass in front of us at a different rate. So I'm going to choose some grass here. I'll press 0 just to make sure everything's solid. F2 will reset all these, and I'm going to press tab a few times to see what I get. This is actually quite nice, but I want something a little bit more bluish and a bit of contrast because it's in the foreground. So I'm just going to bring that down a bit, maybe a bit more green. So there's little flowers here as well that are getting mixed in. These are the colours for those, but you might not want those. And that seems quite nice. So I just want this here, and I'll go for another grass. I'm going to change this green to more of a kind of bluey green, like that. I just want it to look good. And then another grass here. I'm going to store the colours just by left clicking here, and then I'm going to press tab a few times to get something a bit different. I'm going to go behind that layer just to make sure it goes behind that object. I just want to help it out a bit, and then I'm going to darken this colour and maybe this one. Let's see. Oh, that actually changes into little flowers. Nice. And that's some little highlights there, and that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to paste that there. And I think we've got some other grass. So this one's got a little red tinge to it. Maybe I can make it a little bit more orange. So I'll play with these settings, then it will bring some of those tones or take them away. And I'll just add some of these there, and that seems pretty good. Cool. So now if I hide the layers that I use, so that one, and I press I, I'm basically just left with that layer. And I can save that out as well. So I'll save that as my foreground. In fact, I'm going to cancel that for a second. What you might want to do is just move down. So if you right click and move down, you can actually fit that whole image into the view, and it wraps round because of the way we had the wrap mode on with W, and basically now that should export as an image that would tile across the way. So I'm just going to save that, Control S, and this can be called the grass layer. And that should be good to go. Now I'm going to go into Photoshop just to have a check at these. So we've got the blue sky and there should be a grass layer. And there we go. So now if I put that over the blue sky, and I'm just going to change this mode. Okay, go back there, go back there. So now I've got this separate layer that I can tile around the way and have it kind of pop in or do whatever I want. Maybe fade the edges so that it only comes in every now and again if I want, because the way I painted it I could pretty much do that. So I can add a mask here and just get a gradient, some black, and I'm just going to look at the mask and create a little change here. We want to go this way, and I'll just make sure it's straight, and here let's just change that to multiply so we keep what we got. And now I go back here, you'll see that it fades the edges a little bit. I'm just going to go in here and do Control L just to refine that. And that just fades those edges a bit better. So now I've got the option of treating this like its own object that can come in every now and again. It can sort of sweep by to make it look like the foreground. And we've got our sky here and everything's good. So I'm just going to call this our grass. And in fact, I'm going to resize it as well because it is quite big. Resize it to, let's see, 2048 is a nice number for textures. So 2048. I'm going to OK that. And the whole document got that size, that's fine. I also want to make sure that the canvas size is 2048. And that is now going to be our texture. Alright, so I'm going to save that as the grass, and I'll call it 2K texture because it's a 2K texture that Unity or any game engine will like. Okay, so I'm just going to undo what I did here and I get rid of that one. I'm just going to change the actual image size here to 2048 to 2048. I don't mind if it stretches it because we can always re-stretch that whatever we put it onto. So I'm going to just check the tiling of this, so I can go to filter, other, offset, and I'm just going to make sure that it still tiles horizontally without any weird breaks or seams, and that looks fine. So I'm going to save that as our blue sky 2K texture. Okay, and now we're going to get into Unity. Now I recommend getting Unity Hub because you can basically import any version of Unity you want, and it's a good way of organizing your files. So another thing to note is that when I made this grass layer and I made it with wrap mode on, I can still actually use it like a tileable texture because if I use the offset, it still connects up to itself. But I figure because there's already a kind of break here, it's fine just to put a little fade in, and we'll see how that looks soon. Okay, so Unity Hub's here. I'm just going to do a new project. Let's see, go for Unity 2019.4, and I'll just call this parallax effect. Okay, and it'll be 3D, and that's fine. I'll just let Unity open for now. So I can always add more layers if I want to, do some more work here. I'm just going to use this to get that back and press I to bring back the gradient. And if I press P, I can actually preview this parallax effect. You can see the foreground's moving faster than the background, and even the mountains are moving faster than the clouds. But since I've only split it into 2 layers, then I'm only really going to get that 2-layer effect in Unity. But you can see that you could export whatever layers you don't want to see. So I could basically hide everything and just have the mountains in the backdrop, and then maybe the clouds themselves, and so on and so forth. Now if you want to, you can export all the layers individually. It is a little bit slow, but it will export any layers that you've drawn on and give them a name. So if I enable everything again and I press L, and I'll call this layers. It is a little bit slow. You have to wait until this text starts moving again to know that it's finished. And that's okay, it's done it already. There wasn't many layers. And now if I go back into Photoshop and open, I can see if I go to layers, I've got the sky, the clouds there, the mountains, and a couple of grass layers. So I could very well do the same process with these and really layer up a parallax effect, but I'll just do it with 2 combined layers for now. And I've turned them into the right texture size, so it's this one, and we also had the grass layer. I'll just make sure I've saved this grass texture. Yeah, there it's there. So these 2 are what are important. I'm going to put them in their own folder. Call this textures. It keeps it a little bit organized. This is kind of my messy work area while I'm working on Background Designer. So I'll just cancel that for now. Back into Unity, we're just waiting on it loading. So if I have a look at these layers for now, the ones that exported, we've got the layers. So that's these 4. Now if I just open this one, and then go into the folder, and then you see you can bring each of these in. And there you go. You might have to do just a few color adjustments here and there. I recommend rasterizing these layers and then control clicking the layer and then just clicking this mask. And that will actually help some of the alpha do the right thing. You can use Control L on the alpha just to help blend it a little bit nicer here, because there's a little bit of a conversion between exporting from Background Designer and being imported. Some of the pixels end up a little bit odd looking, so that's the process I use. So just Control click the mask, and then Control L, and just play about with this middle slider until you get the look that you want. You can also go in this layer and do Control L if you want to brighten things or darken them. You can play with these layers, these level adjusters, and just bring things up to the kind of level that you want. So it's a little bit of aftertouch needed. So Control here, add your mask, and just adjust things. And Control, add a mask, and make any adjustments there. But most of that is fine now. You can also do Control U to add a bit more saturation back in if you want those colors to really pop a bit more. Even go ahead and change the hue if you want to. So there's some things you can do after the fact. I'm quite happy with the 2 layers, and I'll get started in Unity now. So all I want to do is make 2 cylinder shapes. So You might want to use a 3D application for this because the cylinder's edges, they all point outwards, and we're just going to see a solid cylinder. We're not really going to get a wrapped panoramic view. So what I'm going to do is create something that will do that for us, and I'll just jump into Blender, I guess. Everybody's using Blender these days, I think. Well, not everyone, but there's a lot of people more likely to try it. So let's let Blender load. Okay, so Blender's loaded. I just want to delete the default cube, and I'm going to add a 3D object. So it'll be a mesh and it'll be a cylinder, and then I want to edit that. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I want to edit the faces. So I'm going to take away this face. So I'll delete the face, and I'll delete this face. Okay, and already the UVs, that's the texture coordinates of this, they're already set up for us, so everything should just work. And I can always scale things later to suit. So that's all I need for now, but I need to make sure also that the faces are pointing inward, otherwise we're going to see the wrong result. So I'll just choose all the faces, and I want to edit the normals of this. So now there should be an option here. There used to be an option on the side here for editing normals. Now let me just check normals, and I want to flip them. Okay, so flip the normals, and the only way to really see that is to have like some kind of backface culling. So just check to see if there's a backface culling mode. Shading. You can see I'm fairly new to Unity, but usually there's an option. There we go, backface culling, and now you can see that we only see the inside faces. We don't see these outside ones. Now if I undo what I did, you'll only see these faces because it's backface culled. So I'm just going to bring that mode back. So that was in here, backface culling, yep, and we want to flip the normals. So that was under mesh, normals, and flip. Okay, that's good. So now I'm just going to go back to object mode, and I'm going to export this. Export as an FBX, and desktop's fine for me. That's where I put everything for the time being. Let's call this temp cylinder. Export FBX. Good to go. I'm back into Unity, and I'm going to import that in here. Now I want to be organized a bit, so I'm just going to create a folder and call this parallax. Parallax setup, and I'll create another folder called mesh, and I'm going to import new asset, go to the desktop, and let's see, temp cylinder, and I'll just drag that straight into the scene, and there it is there. Okay, everything looks good so far. It just has a bit of a dummy texture on it, so I'm gonna just make sure that when I imported this, I don't want to use any embedded materials or anything, so I'll just get rid of any material setups, or say none, and that's fine. It's also imported like the whole scene, so let's just delete that because we don't want the whole scene from Blender. We just want the selected object. So make sure when you export FBX that you have selected object only checked, and that way that should work. So let's call this, call it parallax cylinder for now. That sounds like a better name. And I'm going to import new asset and parallax cylinder. Don't want to import any materials. I'll just No, I'll just say none. Create material creation none, because we're going to make up our own one. And I'll just import a new asset. I'm going to go to where I've got my textures, import both of these. And this one, I just want to make sure alpha is transparent is checked. And I'll just have a look at it here, and you can see I can only see the bottom bit there. That's good. This one doesn't need any change done. I want to right click and do create a material. Sky material. I'm just going to drag that into albedo. I'm going to enable emission because we want it to have full color. We don't want it to see shadows like this. So I'm just going to drag that into emission as well, and that way it's all kind of self-lit. Take away the smoothness because we don't want it to look like it's got any sort of shine or anything, and everything's good from there. I'll create another material, and this will be called the grass material. And I want to drag that into albedo there, and also into the emission, but make sure that you check this box, that way it shows the slot for the texture. I'm going to change the mode to cutout. Now cutout is going to give us basically a cutout of the grass area, and we can choose how much that needs to be reduced, but that should be good for that one. Everything's set up correct. I'll take away the smoothness actually, and everything else is fine. Now I'm going to bring in the parallax cylinder into the scene. I'll apply the sky material to it. Now there's another thing you can see, that the normals aren't correct. They're all kind of faceted. You can actually change that here in Unity. If I go to the model and have a look at any of the information here, for some reason I've got two inspectors. I'm just going to close that one. Right, and I want to go down to import, not import, but I'll do calculate, and I'll put this away up to like 120 and hit apply, and that's going to smooth those normals out. Right, so now we've got a tileable sky, but it's still receiving shadows, so let me just fix that. You can actually click on the mesh here and turn off receive shadows, and no cast shadows as well, but for some reason it's still doing it. Maybe we don't need the directional light so much, because you can imagine this being designed for a 2D game. So I'll just delete that, and we're left with a self-lit background. I just want to make sure the UVs are correct because we're not seeing the full texture here. What we can do is change the tiling of it so that we see it. So I've changed that to 2, and I can change the horizontal to 3 maybe, and we get a background that's going to repeat and look the same. Okay, I'm going to bring in a camera, or move my camera over here. Let's see, move that there, and I'll change this to 1610. I'm going to move the camera down to a view that looks good. And then I can always scale this cylinder to look a bit more correct. Scale it and move it until it looks round about right. And I'm going to duplicate the cylinder, and I'll rename this as grass. And I'll put the grass material onto that, so I can drag the grass material over here, and I'll just make the cylinder a little bit smaller. I also want to change the 3D icon size. That camera is really getting in the way, and because I've done that, I'm going to move that around and just make sure that I can see it. So we've got the grass material. That should have this texture on it, and yeah, there it's there. And maybe I have to play with this tiling. I think I had to make Y2, yeah, and I'll make X3. And there we go, we've got that. So I just want to move that up now so it comes into view. And there it is there. And now I can play with the camera's field of view actually until it looks a bit better. Something like that. And now if I rotate the grass, it moves at a different rate from the foreground, and you can't really see that so well here. There we go. And I've got a kind of sort of Ferris wheel type effect, or a kind of merry-go-round of the background. Now it is a little distorted because it's not really designed for this, but what I can do is I can play with the scale, like scale it out even more, and scale it down a bit, like that. And do the same with the grass, scale it out more this way, move it up, and it should flatten out a bit more. Now it's got a very kind of pixely look here, so I'm going to go back to the grass material and actually change that to transparent, and it should be softer. I might have to go back to the texture itself, and I don't know why it's looking streaky like this. Let's turn that off to apply. Yeah, it needs to be on. I think it's something to do with one of the blend modes, so transparent. Let's use fade actually. Fade's a little bit nicer. That seems to work. And yeah, that's good. Okay, so now you can basically add a script to rotate the background. And that would be like a parallax effect, or you can put them both on planes that swap themselves round. When they get outside of the view, they can pop back round to the front again, and that's kind of the basis of a parallax background. There's a few things about the camera that aren't quite right, so we could maybe change that to orthographic, and yeah, move that down there. Let me change the size of that and really fit that scene in there. I think the mountains look a little bit squashed. I'm just going to look at the way I made that. Yeah, so I can change the tiling of the sky material, or I can squash the texture a bit more. A bit like that. And then move the grass one down. Also scale it up and move it where I want it to, and that's ready to go. So I can rotate these at different rates from each other. Now if I want to rotate them both at the same time, just like both, and you can see now it looks a bit weird because this is so small. Now I need to make sure that that is as wide as it needs to be. So let me just check the values here. So we've got this, so I'm going to copy component, go to the grass and paste component values. And now that's a bit better. I'm just going to scale the grass down a slight bit so it's in front. And there we go. And I can go to the grass texture or scale it up the way. Move it up. There we go, that looks a bit better. And I can always tint the colour of it a bit here. In fact, it's better to be done through the colour here. And make a bit of a blue tone. Like that, and if I wanted, I can fade it out a bit here, but you can see I can see through it. And all I need now is a script or an animation that moves these at a different rate, and I've got basically a parallax background. So I'm just going to rotate these, and you can kind of see the idea. It's got a weird effect where it kind of gets shorter at the sides. But it's an interesting way of having a tileable background. Ideally you want to have this on a flat plane, so let's just do that. Make a plane and rotate it, and then add our sky material texture to it. You can see it's the wrong way around just now. I'm going to make a duplicate of that. Call the sky material for the plane. I'll change the tiling to 1 on the Y, and I'm just going to rotate that this way. this is the other option, which won't have any distortion at the edges. I'm just going to scale this until it's the right width. Now it should be around about 3 because I've tiled it 3 times. And if I get my camera now, let's just bring that here, rotate it. I'm just going to hide the parallax cylinder. Choose the camera and just change the size, move it down a bit, and then I would duplicate that, and this would be plane for grass. I'll duplicate this and call it material grass, and I'll put that on the plane for grass, and I just need to change the tiling so it's only 1 on this one, and I guess if I wanted to just make it 2 times here, and it really will tile differently and look a bit different. Okay, so now I just want to move it a little bit in front so that it doesn't cut through or behind. So if that was my view of my game, I think that's just a little bit, it needs to be a bit wider. Yeah, so as I move this around, I'd actually have 2 of these, so I'll duplicate it, and as the view basically moves past the camera, when it gets to a point where that line cuts out, this one here is actually going to jump back to this point. So you would need a little script that does this, and maybe I can make something up and make another part of the video where we can see that happening. Otherwise you could have an infinitely tiled strip big enough for the whole level. We just make this really wide, like really wide, but we don't stretch the texture like that because you see it's really making it look ugly. What you would actually do is go to the sky material plane and actually make the tiling a whole number, like 10 or something, maybe 20, whatever size you've made the plane. So we've made it 114 times, so if I just change that to 100, then now I can play with the value here, so maybe 50, that looks about right. Okay, so it's the same thing again and again, but it's big enough for the entire game. So as we move our character across here, basically if I move my camera, I'll put the, just imagine the plain grasses on there as well. Let's see, that is there, right? So camera, and yeah, imagine I'm kind of moving across like that with my character. Now the grass itself would also move slower at a different rate to the character's movement. So it would move just at a different rate if the character was sat here. We can always add an object, a little cube in front of the camera. Wherever the camera's decided to go. So do that, and then the cube, I guess, just bring that down. Yeah, so if that was your player there, let's see, I'll just make him really thin as if he's like a little Paper Mario. Move that down behind the grass, so the grass would kind of be like the foreground. And this is very similar to the way they do like the 2D games, so ideally you would use this in a 2D game setup. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger like that, so you can really see the effect. And there you go. So as the character moves around, he's in front of the grass, and the camera would follow your player. Like that, but you could have the background going at a very slow rate. Maybe it moves with the camera a little bit more. So it could all be relative to the camera. and it's just a case of writing a script so that at runtime all of these follow the camera but not at the same rate. They kind of try to chase it a little bit, so they're going to move towards the camera but slower, and that way you can get the whole parallax effect. So I hope that gives you an idea towards making parallax type backgrounds using Backdrop Designer, making really nice skies and props to go in the foreground. In the next video, hopefully I'll make a script that actually makes this work. Thanks for watching. Bye.